What is up, Fantasy Football Nation? Week 10 is here, and it is time to get into my weekly starts and sits so that you can be ready to win your crucial Week 10 matchups. But first, be sure to like this video, share this video on social media, and subscribe to this channel. If you have any fantasy football questions or comments, could be on waiver wire ads, could be on trade targets, could be on start and sit options. Of course, we're not going to touch on every single start and sit. So if you have any of those questions, put them in the comment section. I will answer them on the next video. If it is an urgent, if it's something that you need answered before this week's games, I will answer it just in the comment section. But if you want your question answered, maybe a trade question that can last, I will answer it on the next video. Let's get into this. We're going to start off with my starts of the week. We'll begin at the quarterback position. I'm going to give you two starts, and they are playing each other, both rookies. Justin Herbert was the first one I want to get into. Going against Miami, he has scored 20 points in each of his last 5 games. I was not a huge fan of Justin Herbert coming out of the draft. Those of you that have read any of my articles at BehindTheSteelCurtain.com fan post section, I was not a huge fan of Justin Herbert. I had him behind Joe Burrow, I had him behind Tua, I had him behind Jordan Love. He was just a tall guy that played quarterback, really, in college. He wasn't that impressive, but he is making things happen with this team. And the Dolphins are obviously a good matchup this week, been super successful, so I'd keep riding with the hot hand. Herbert is a great start. Another good start is Tua Tagovailoa, playing in that same game, scored 21 points this past week against Arizona. I think this game could be a similar game script to what we saw a week ago. Going to be a lot of passing, probably not running the ball a whole lot. Both teams have injuries at the running back position, so I believe they're going to be relying heavily on the passing game. And the Chargers are the third worst against quarterbacks in fantasy football, so that bodes well for Tua as well. Let's move to the running backs. I'm going to give you 3 names. The first one is Kareem Hunt, going against Houston. Now, first of all, Houston is the third worst defense against in terms of fantasy against running backs. But now get this, in all but 3 games, he has scored 12 points or more. Now Kareem Hunt, he hasn't run for 100 yards in any one single game yet. I get that, but he's been getting a lot of touchdowns, getting a lot of red zone work, getting a lot of passing game work. I know that Nick Chubb is coming back this week, but I still think Kareem Hunt is a good start. They're going to probably ease him in, so I still think Kareem Hunt's probably going to be the number 1 running back for this week. And he's been super serviceable for them. In the 3 games that he hasn't scored 12 points or more against, Pittsburgh, Baltimore, two of the top running defenses in all of the league, and then Las Vegas. So really only 1 game that he hasn't scored over 12 points that was a game that you kind of were hoping he would get to that amount. You couldn't have really expected him to get that against Pittsburgh and Baltimore. So Kareem Hunt is a good start, a guy that you should probably consider trading for if you can get him somewhat cheap, because he has good matchups weeks 15 and 16 against the Giants and Jets. So that's something else to keep in mind. My next start is Antonio Gibson versus the Lions. I'm not going to talk a whole lot about that. We know what Gibson is, and we know what the Lions' defense is. They've tried to bring in pieces to help against the run game. Trey Flowers, he's injured. Danny Shelton. They have a bunch of guys on the front that are supposed to be these excellent run stuffers. They're going to be one of the top teams against the run. Well, they've given up more fantasy points to running backs than any team in the league. So Antonio Gibson is a great start this week. Going to get a lot of passing work. Going to get a lot of catches out of the backfield from Alex Smith. Miles Sanders is the last start I have this week, and this is if he plays. If he doesn't play, I would say start Boston Scott. The Giants are in the bottom 10 in terms of giving up points to the running back position. And the offensive line for Philly is horrible, so there's going to be a lot of check down passes, and that's really what they have to go with right now. Will Fuller will begin with my wide receiver starts of the week. Will Fuller going against the Cleveland Browns, and I do want to point this out. The Browns are the 5th worst against fantasy defenses, but another thing here is that Will Fuller scored a touchdown each of his last 6 games, and he scored 100 yards. He has 100 yards receiving in 3 of his last 5 games. He has 11 non-PPR fantasy points in all but 2 games this year. And his lowest scoring outage since week 2 when he was shut out against Baltimore was 9.5 fantasy points, and that I believe was just a couple weeks ago. So Will Fuller has been super consistent, and we knew coming into the year he could be their number 1 wide receiver as long as he stays healthy. And that's been the thing with Fuller. We know he is a beast when he is healthy, and he has been that so far this year, surprisingly. And going against bad Browns secondary, I believe Will Fuller is a guy you have to start right now. He's playing very well, very consistent, a guy that's going to be a good wide receiver 2 for you right now. not AJ Brown, Antonio Brown. I'm getting so used to AJ Brown, I haven't thought of Antonio Brown a whole lot, but he is a start for me this week. Antonio Brown going against Carolina. I know it's not the best matchup on paper either, but let's just remember what happened to them on Sunday night. Tampa Bay getting totally embarrassed. The running game's been a little bit off and on. Ronald Jones was the hot end for a while. Then they bring in Fournette. Now he's the number one running back. I believe they're going to air it out in this game. They are mad. Brady's mad. AB's mad. And Brady knows he has to get AB the ball quickly or else he's going to start throwing temper tantrums. So it's time to get the ball to AB, and I think that's going to happen this week. I think he'll get into the end zone for a touchdown. The other start this week, and this one's an obvious start, Robert Woods. Not honestly, if you have Cooper Kupp as well, both are excellent starts going against Seattle. Now, I play non-PPR, but just astounding numbers in PPR formats. The Seattle Seahawks are giving up an average of 59.5 points per week to receiving cores. That is just absolutely insane. That is how bad this defense has gotten. Even with Jamal Adams, they're still trash. So Robert Woods is a great start this week. That will finish out my wide receiver starts for the week. I have two tight ends I want to get into before we move to the sits. One is Robert Tonyan. Who would have thought coming into the year Robert Tonyan would be a top 5 fantasy tight end? Well, he is, and he's going against Jacksonville, who's the 5th worst defense against tight ends. So I believe Robert Tonyan is a good start. Another one is Evan Engram, kind of been a bust this year, but he is going against the Eagles, who are the 3rd worst against tight ends. And last week, Evan Engram did get 10 targets. I think he only brought in like 5 of them, but he is getting targeted by Daniel Jones, and the Eagles are a favorable matchup, rather. So I believe this is a good week to start Evan Engram if you need help with the tight end position. Moving to the sits, first sit at quarterback is Teddy Bridgewater, and I know he had a great week. He's been hot, but going against Tampa Bay, not a super favorable matchup. I don't really see his success continuing. I mean, if you turn in terms of actual football, I think he's still going to be a solid quarterback for them. Fantasy football-wise, I'm not there yet. I just don't. I think Tampa Bay is going to come out on fire this week. They're mad after that loss. I think they're going to come out on all cylinders, offensively and defensively. I think there is a good chance that Teddy Bridgewater just gets shut down. There's a lot of good quarterback matchups this week. You can find better options out there than Teddy Bridgewater. The same goes for Kirk Cousins going against Chicago. He's had a couple nice weeks here, not throwing as many interceptions anymore, but Chicago's not a favorable defense. So if you have Kirk Cousins, either drop him or bench him. Moving to the running backs, Darrell Henderson, and you look on paper, Seattle, okay, well, I got to put this guy in my lineup. Well, Seattle is actually kind of been in the middle of the pack against running backs, but a lot of that is probably due to game script. There's a lot of passing in these games. Teams are generally behind, or, they're just trying to keep pace with Russell Wilson. So he could get some receiving work out of the backfield, but Carlos Dunlap is a good addition for this run defense for Seattle that was struggling mightily. And Dunlap had a good first game with Seattle. I think that he's really going to help this front line that's been struggling. So I think he's going to help that run defense a lot. Darrell Henderson, I say temper your expectations. Maybe a good flex starter. If you're desperately thin at running back, maybe running back 2. But don't expect a 20-point performance from Henderson this week. DeAndre Swift is the next one, and he almost reached 10 points in non-PPR leagues this past week, and his usage is going up, but going against Washington, who's number 7 against running backs, plus it's so inconsistent with that Lions offense right now, I just don't know what to expect. I think it's a boomer bust play, and I'm leaning more towards the bust with DeAndre Swift this week. Just can't trust him right now. We never know how much Patricia's going to use Adrian Peterson. The last running back sit is Ronald Jones, and this goes back to the point, I think Tampa Bay is going to air it out in this game. And let's not forget that Leonard Fournette is taking more and more of the carries away from Ronald Jones. So Ronald Jones is a guy I think you got to sit right now and kind of hold your breath and hope that he can bring something to you come playoff time. Moving to the wide receivers, Justin Jefferson going against Chicago, and I've had Adam Thielen in several of my leagues. He has really been struggling the past few weeks, so I'm tempted to bench him this week as well. But Jefferson going against Chicago, that same matchup. Chicago's been extremely tough on wide receivers, the top 5, so I would avoid this matchup as much as you can, really on both sides for the most part. Davante Parker going against the Chargers. Now, Parker, he's only scored 6 points in each of his last 2 games with Tua as quarterback. And the Chargers are 8th best against wide receivers. Overall, their defense has been garbage, but they have been pretty good against wide receivers. So I would temper expectations for Davante Parker as well right now, as he's getting acclimated with a new quarterback in Tua Tagovailoa. Corey Davis is another sit. He got blanked this past week. And I'm just not sure what his usage is. Some weeks, Jonnu Smith is that number 2 target in that offense. And of course, you have A.J. Brown stealing a huge bulk of the targets. So I don't know what to expect from Corey Davis really right now. I'm just really not on him. Going against Indianapolis, we've seen what their defense has done this year. Not a good start this week. Moving on to the tight ends, I have a couple tight ends here for you. Hunter Henry going against Miami. Henry has been a bust. Hasn't really gotten on the same page with Justin Herbert yet. And then the other sit I have at the tight end position is Tyler Higbee. Going against Seattle, again, it looks good, Seattle on paper, but they are the 9th best against tight ends this year. And Higbee, outside of his 23-point performance in Week 2, I don't believe he's topped 6 points the rest of the season in one single game. So do not trust Tyler Higbee. I would honestly just drop him if I were you. Let's move on to the sleepers. I have 4. I'm going to give you 4 quick sleepers here. Drew Lock going against Las Vegas, who are the 5th worst against fantasy defense, or 5th worst against quarterbacks in fantasy football. And if you look at Drew Lock's numbers the past couple weeks, they are continually getting better. He's leading his teams back late. And we're starting to see Jerry Jeudy gain a little bit more of a rapport with Lock. Of course, Tim Patrick has been upping his game ever since Cortland Sutton has been down. And Noah Fant's getting a little bit healthier. So he's getting some of his weapons back. The offensive line, so-so. But going against the Raiders, who aren't going to get a whole lot of pressure on him, I think this is a decent matchup. If you're desperate at quarterback this week, which you shouldn't be, there's a pretty good amount of good matchups this week. But if you do need a quarterback, maybe in 2 QB leagues, Drew Lock is a good start. Duke Johnson going against Cleveland. You have to monitor David Johnson's status coming up to the game. But Duke Johnson going against his former team. He's been getting a lot of pass-catching work, but the Browns are not that strong against the running game either in terms of fantasy. So I believe Duke Johnson is another guy you should consider as a flex option if David Johnson is unable to go. At wide receiver, Anthony Miller going against Minnesota. He has picked it up the past 2 games, over 50 receiving yards in each of his last 2 games. He's getting a lot more targets. Part of that could be game script, but let's not forget that Minnesota is number 30 in the league against wide receivers. And they haven't done particularly well against slot receivers either. Jeff Gladney has had his struggles. They have a lot of young corners there that are having a little bit of a problem. So I believe that Anthony Miller is a decent start if you need him in the flex. And then tight end is Logan Thomas. The tight ends don't do particularly well against the Lions, but I love that his target share is going up, and he is playing literally every snap on offense. So those are huge things for me. We're going to finish today with my overcomer of the week, and that is Joe Mixon against my Steelers. The Steelers have given up, ever since Tyson Alualu, Steelers nose tackle, has been injured the past 2 weeks, given up 200 yards exactly against Baltimore running backs and 108 yards against Dallas, who really had no passing game threat. That leaves out the rushing yards that Lamar Jackson and Garrett Gilbert both had. So the Steelers have been awful against the run the past 2 weeks, and I believe Joe Mixon has a chance to shred the Steelers' defense if Alualu is not back, which I don't think he will be in time for Sunday. So Joe Mixon is a guy that, even though he has a difficult matchup on paper, I believe he's a guy that is a good start this week, at least as a running back too. That's going to do it all for today. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. If you haven't seen my trade target video, go and check that out. The trade deadline is coming up in most leagues, so if you need trade advice, go to that video. If you have other trade questions or start and sit questions, put them in the comment section. I will answer them on the next video. And be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you all for watching. Have a good one.